And we're on. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Search Geeks Speak. And we've got a panel of luminaries. And we're going to be digging in some SEO testing and things like that. Before we start, I guess we'll go around the room here. Tell everyone who you are and where you work, etc. Bill, we'll go with you just to get you warmed up because you're too busy chatting.
I'm Bill Slosky. I'm the author at SEO by the Sea, and I'm the director of SEO research at GoFish Digital.
Very nice, very nice. Eric, sir.
Hello, everybody. Eric Enga, lead author on the Art of SEO, now general manager at Proficient Digital since...
I know, I've been getting used to saying that, or...
Yeah, I am. After Stone Temple Consulting was acquired on July 16th this year, so just over 60 days at Proficient, I was CEO and founder of Stone Temple. So that's me.
Excellent. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Did. Mr. Pete, or Dr. Pete, I don't know what we call you these days.
Yeah, I'm so used to Dr. Pete, I don't even hear the difference anymore. So
yeah, I was going to say, because, you know, I try to find you on Facebook and all this stuff makes you have to be yourself. I was like, well, Dr. Pete didn't do me anything. Everybody
knows I have a last name.
Yeah.
I think I have a last name. Yeah, no, I'm Pete Myers out of Moz in Seattle, and I'm the marketing scientist there, which is just a thing I made up so I can do what I feel like doing, like being here.
Yeah, well, I'd say that every time I get together with Bill and he uses that fancy new title of his, I keep thinking to myself, I need a new one. You know, I own the company. I should be able to do that every couple of years. You know, just give myself something fancy. Steve.
Yes, Steve Plunkett. I'm a random SEO consultant for hire. I've not landed in a position other than just working for people with big companies want me to solve problems and keep my mouth shut. So.
And of course, Terry. Got on
mute this thing, Dave.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'm with Dave over at the Dojo. I founded SEO Pros. Yeah, I'm riding Dave's coattails.
Yeah, all right, let's go with that. But interesting. 1, 2, what do we got? 3, 4, 6. You know, there's over 100 years experience sitting here, I'm thinking right now.
Oh, yeah.
Easily, you know, because I think I'm 20 years in and I'm kind of, well, now the flyer likes my camera. I'm 20 years in and you guys have been around longer than me for the most part. So, yeah, there's a good 120 years worth of experience sitting around here. That's pretty cool.
That's a depressing start, Dave. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. I actually want to talk anymore on this show. I
got to get my walker and head to lunch.
Yeah.
I retire in February.
That's it'll be the golden age at some point, boys. We'll all be gone, and they'll just refer back to us, you know, as the golden age at one point. Gets that way too, because you know, a few people have passed away over the last couple of years or whatever, and you know, I think eventually it's just okay. Enough of this depressing shit. Shut up, Pete. All right, so SEO testing was kind of where we were going with this, but I think there's a few levels I guess I want to hit, and one of the beefs I think that, you know, when Bill and I get talking a lot of the times is towards almost what you're testing or how you're testing it, etc. Meaning that some people like to run tests on sort of deconstructing Google or trying to find some way of figuring out an algorithm, and then they go running out and publish their 200 ranking factor post or whatever the hell it is. And, you know, it's always been an issue. And for me, you know, as someone like Bill, that we sit around reading patents and we do what we do, you know, we've seen enough patents that treat different query spaces different ways, different positions different ways, different types of, you know, query classifications different ways. You know, sites, you know, and you guys, we can go on forever, like, you know, authority and temporal factors and, you know, location factors and all that kind of stuff. So to me, at some point, you literally need thousands upon thousands of sites in at least hundreds of different types of query spaces and geographical tests, and like to get anything beyond anecdotal evidence. I think a lot of the times gets missed when people put out these tests, and I think a lot of it's rubbish. I mean, so Bill, you want to at least follow up on that one before we dig deeper?
Sure. Okay. So one of the patents I looked at recently was one that was originally from 2003, and it was just updated. It involves large data sets and looking at user behavior, and they break information they collect about user behavior into information about searchers, documents, and queries. And how results turn out. It involves what they refer to as millions of instances of data, which can sound a little bit intimidating. And I have had search engineers tell me that they do collect lots and lots of data. The issue sometimes is having some idea of what to do with it all, to make sense of it.
Right, but I think what you're alluding to there, Bill, which I agree with, and which David did as well, is that there's a segmentation that can happen, and in what Google's doing. So I'm just going to draw upon examples that actually Marcus Tober has shared in some presentations. That if you go look at behavior patterns,
Marcus Search Metrics, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so you just look at the different market segments like health and fitness, where content that ranks tends to have bazillions of videos, bazillions being a technical term, and in the dating world, there tends to be a tremendous amount of social media activity, and in the divorce world, not so much in the social media activity. I'm just giving these as sort of practical examples of different kinds of segmentation that actually happen in the markets. And that doesn't mean that Google is using any of those things as ranking factors, but it does mean that they could, right? And there's different things that might matter in different markets that would cause you to segment what you're doing differently. And that's what makes it so difficult to run a few SEO tests. And
right, and I think furthermore, like, so how do you, like, when you, since you are talking to the SEO community right now, how do you preface that kind of stuff? As far as, they read some person put out some tests, but they don't show how many sites. There's no backup to that data of where they got it. I think the problem is a lot of younger, newer, whatever you want to say, SEOs see some sort of post like this. We ran this test, this and that. I think there needs to be some sort of qualifier out there when people read this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it cuts both ways too, because you can throw out 10 million data points pretty easily these days and put it in an attachment and have somebody go, oh, they have all this data, they must know what they're doing. And on the flip side, that can be bullshit too. Like you can wow them with that Google Doc, and I think it's trickier than that. It comes down to be transparent about the methods is certainly really important. You give somebody the data, yeah, they can at least look at it for themselves. That means something. But I think we've gone the other way sometimes too, where we throw out these giant data sets like they magically are meaningful, and there's pitfalls there too. So we rely on people to interpret a lot that maybe they don't know how to interpret.
Well, yeah, like, Bill and I come across a research paper of some kind, I often go right to the bottom at first to just see, what were the data pulls that they used for it before I even start to read the findings. You know what I mean?
When I see a blog post that tells us that it's a study conducted on 19 million sites, all I can think of is it's link bait.
Yeah.
Right.
That was written to get people to click on it. And
if 19 million is in the title, especially, right?
Right.
Yeah, no, and then it's easy to put out the big numbers there, but what's really more important to understand, and it's hard to understand just from a blog post, is what's the discipline of the tester or the testing organization? What's the level of discipline being used in the tests? And one of the things that I try to do here at Proficient Digital, see, I'm getting used to it, and that we did at Stone Temple before we were acquired, is my mantra has always been, the data tells the story. I don't give a crap what you think the answer is. That doesn't matter. In fact, it's a more interesting story if the data tells something that disagrees with what you thought the answer is, right? And you just, and So that's a great concept, and that's easy to express also. But the expertise to dig through and actually really get the meaning out of the data is not at all trivial.
I think we're dealing with data sizes too, where sometimes if we just say, oh, it's significant, or it's, you know, past some statistical test, Google has this problem. Google can go in and say, you know, we're going to change links from 3333 CC to, you know, 3434 CC, and they run it on a billion people, and they find there's a difference, and so they shift the color blue, you know, by like 1 nanometer, and I don't know anything about, you know, but something like half of the world could even perceive, and they get a significant difference, and you're like, well, who fucking cares? Like, what, you know, what does that really mean in the world? And so, you know, it goes back and forth. Like, I think you got to be careful with mass scale testing, where you've got so much data you can almost prove anything, but did it mean anything? Like, you know, has it have a practical meaning for us? I guess for Google, if it gets, you know, 0.01% more clicks, maybe it means something. But what do we learn, and what do we take with us to the next thing? Everybody else runs out and changes their links by, you know, one tiny little speck of blue, and you know, nothing happens. I guess it's not very expensive, but you know, it's not going to help them.
And the important thing is, what did I learn? And most of them, I learned nothing, because all it does is confuse me, these huge tests, because the only tests that matter to me are the ones on the sites that I'm working on. The rest is just hypothetical stuff that, you know, hey, I think I can do that as well as anyone else. And for instance, a few years back, a big test was done by a well-known place, Pete, and they were saying that there's no correlation between H1 and ranking. Yeah, my gut tells me that was absolutely wrong. That's why I don't like that kind of testing, because one site at a time, and that's something me and Dave stress, is every site is unique, even if they're in the same industry. I've said my piece.
There you go. No, it absolutely makes sense that each situation is unique, and you're right, even in the same industry. And you know, just to sort of give listeners intuition on that, it happens all the time to me. Somebody comes and says, "Okay, I see my competitors doing really well with this tactic. Why don't we copy them?" And my response is, because it probably won't work for you. And that's just the reality.
Or Amazon, you know, Amazon does this and they rank really great. Well, like, they were really great in spite of that stupid thing they did. You're not Amazon. I hear that so often. Like, you know, a lot of sites rank even though they did that thing.
And that's what a lot of SEOs don't really understand, is that if everybody in your industry is doing something and it's not really helping, if everybody's doing it, your test could be wrong because everyone is doing it.
Right.
This is not to get really deep into that, but this is a big thing I don't think we've done well with correlation studies, and I will not get into a big correlation fight.
I didn't want to either.
We've seen a few of those over the years.
Okay, but here's the reality, and this is something we haven't communicated well. One thing that they're really bad at, and I think we don't separate well in SEO, is separating relevance factors from ranking factors. So if you look at correlation studies over time, you'll see that keyword usage is declining. And I think that's true, but that's in certain contexts, like keyword in your content. Because Google's getting better at that, and anybody who's ranking has a certain amount of keyword relevance. And so if you're ranking at all, you're passing that relevance bar. And it may not make a difference between number 1 and number 20. And so when we're looking at that big study, so I don't think we always communicate what.
Look at things like, you know, authority or trust kind of related factors. That's almost impossible to measure because we don't know thresholds. We don't know what they're looking at. You can look at temporal factors. And how do you start adding that into a mix if you're comparing site A, B, and C together? Like how are you looking at temporality of content, temporality of links, temporality of other activities and updates on the site? How are you, to try and put all this into a mix to actually get actionable data, I think can be next to impossible. Now, sorry, go ahead.
Well, even authority, if you look at a really competitive query at the top 50, everybody's high authority. And so you could do a correlation study on just that one query and say, well, authority doesn't matter because it doesn't vary much across the 50. It was like, well, it matters a lot. It's just that everybody already passed that bar.
Well, or I can literally make the opposite argument, by the way. If I'm looking,
it depends on the query, right?
Well, yeah, but if I'm looking at the top 10 of the results, is everybody has passed this incredibly high relevance bar, right? Because if you're not extremely relevant, you know, you just, there isn't anything else you could do SEO wise to rank for that query, right? So all the authority in the world won't help a Tupperware site rank for a used car query. Ain't gonna happen, right? But I think the granularity and relevance gaps from you know, the top few results is very small, except for one factor. And this, in my opinion, relates to a lot of what we saw in March and April from Google, which is what we saw is they really began to do some dramatic tests in understanding user intent better. That was one of my observations. So it turns out that I have snapshots of some results,
which has been like ongoing since literally 2013 and beyond.
Well, you know, but they took it to a whole nother level, in my opinion, in earlier this year. You're right, David, I agree with you, but I think they went to a completely another level because I have snapshots for queries in February, April, June, and September, where you see dramatic shifts. Like one of them is for digital cameras. If you looked at digital cameras 9 months ago, 3 of the top 4 results were digital camera review sites.
So, but you mean user intent, just for my clarification, and of course everyone watching, you're talking user intent as far as like query classifications and things of that element, you mean? Like,
yeah, so someone
as far as, you know, transaction information or quasi in between and things of that nature, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So someone types in digital cameras, do they really want e-commerce experience? Do they want a review site? Do they want, you know, information?
Right, or if they put in an actual model, are they looking for documentation on it or tutorials on it? Or are they looking to buy one without those transactional modifiers?
To view them. Am I looking to hack it or view it?
Yeah. Well, sure. So you know, this is something that I think is a really big amount of a big shift. Well, you're right. It's been going on since 2013. But I think they pushed it to a whole nother level, and this is actually one of the places where I do think their machine learning algorithms are.
And to be honest with you, Eric, that was one of the things Terry and I and a few people privately talked about with that August thing. You know, everyone was going off calling it the medic thing, and we were seeing query classification changes yet again in August. Like we saw a lot of that when we were looking at it. So
right, and that makes this whole SEO testing thing even more complex, because what happens to take the relevance and authority things and mix it in one bag together. If Google has decided that 3 of the top 4 results are going to be e-commerce sites come hell or high water because that's the intent match, and you try to measure the relevance of that and the authority of that against the Wikipedia page that appeared in the results for a while, or you know, some other you know, when they still had a review site in there, these kinds of things, those guys are actually operating at completely different scales in the same SERP, right? Because user intent is this other thing, which is a guiding factor where, okay, you need the relevance, but the authority is you know, not relevant.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, I completely agree with that. We've seen a ton of that with SERP features too. So I just want to make the point that generally speaking, if everybody's doing something, some of these tests, you can't tell if, you know, that's not the differentiating factor. And that could change tomorrow too.
Yeah.
But yeah, not to say relevance is still incredibly important. But
well, I agree with the way you put it, by the way. I was just pointing out that you could look at it completely.
Well, I mean, that points back to your segmentation aspect too. Like that's another segment that if query intent is, if you're in the wrong query intent bucket, all those other things might not matter either. And just take one giant average of everything, you're not going to see that.
Right.
We have another issue that most people may not be aware of. If you've been following the Google developer blog, they talked about federated machine learning, where people using mobile devices, Android devices, Pixels, have machine learning going on their phones, and it gets what their phone learns gets uploaded to the cloud and then downloaded to all the other phones the next day. And the machine learning that goes on phones is not the same machine learning going on people's desktops.
Right. Absolutely.
And Pete,
And Echo and Home are doing the same thing.
Yep.
I was going to say, when you said about the keywords, personally, I have cut down on matches. So if you're looking for matches on certain keywords, got to expand that to concepts. And that's why those keywords are, because to rank now, you got to put in those other terms that are related, or the whole thing falls apart. And for lack of LSI keyword stuff, you know what I mean?
Right. If you were just looking at exact match keywords as the relevance metric, your test would suddenly say, well, exact keywords don't matter anymore.
Right.
Well,
you're testing
they
all
matter a lot. You just are measuring them 10 years back, you know?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Well, and that's where, like, what matters more is the breadth and depth of the content now, in my view, right? It's like, not only is the piece of content cover a lot of the related concepts, but now do you have other pages that cover closely related concepts to those, and then interlinking between all of them so that the user, you know, whatever part of that journey around this topic area they want to be in, they can find what they want on your site.
And Google also appears to be understanding context better and grabbing information from knowledge bases so that they can context terms that help define the meaning, help disambiguate who certain entities might be when they share the same name. When terms share the same meaning, they'll look for certain other terms on same pages to see which meaning was intended.
Yep.
So Google's learning relevance from different sources, different ways. It's much more than just matching of words on a document and a query term.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people in the industry are having some problems, I guess you could say.
Well, it's still all about the entity. What is the entity of? Is it a restaurant? Is it a brand of a product that I can buy online? Is it, you know, a food type that's going to show me a recipe? Is it an informational query of, you know, what should I have my pregnant wife eat in the second trimester kind of thing? You know, there's all kinds of different things. I think the answer panel is showing that, but how does that translate over to voice search on a Google at Home or on an Alexa unit? You know what I mean?
I know the answer to that one. That's anything she wants.
Wow, you're good at this game. Have you tested that?
If you wish to live.
That comes from testing, right?
Or be happy.
That's just pure experience.
I just looked up all the food and bought like 3 of everything, depending on which kind of still there. The stuff that's still there, I know that's okay for me to eat.
So I go.
Yeah.
That's your own. That's like your own split test.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's a good segue then, Pete. You said split test. So I guess the other half of this conversation I wanted to get into is what can people test? What can you do? Because I know a lot of you guys have done this. Like, I don't care if it's something as small as within your own niche or your own market, you know, working with title tags or doing actual split tests or things of that nature. I know you guys have all done various types of tests. So what kind of things can SEOs actually go and try and dig into that will give them something, you know, actionable or useful beyond, you know, the link baities, you know, type of posts? What can people actually test that is useful for your client's site or your own site or whatever?
I had to break this down for somebody the other day, so I'm going to jump in here. One is the technical aspects. What can we do as SEOs? Page speed, SSL, those kind of things for the technical website part, or the mobile app, or the mobile as far as mobile index, etc. Then you go into the query space based on user needs. What do the users want? Are we asking people over the phone? What are they asking when they call in for 100 times a day? Are we addressing that online in the query space? Then the other part is what is the, again, I go back to the thing I just said, the entity. What is the needs of the entity? I want to see a menu for a restaurant. I want to know how they open. I want to know what app I can use to get their food delivered to my house. I want to know the nutritional information. I mean, that's kind of the way I've split it up. Anybody else got any feedback on that?
Yes, I think it's important to take notes, to annotate in Google Analytics changes you make to a site.
Yep, I'm 100% there. What I do is, if it's the SEO team or the developers or anybody, I just get them to keep it in a Word doc, text doc spreadsheet, and then just annotate the name of that sheet that everyone can access somewhere else or whatever.
I want to address there is that one fundamental challenge. It's hard to split test Google, right? You can put 2 pages out to your visitors. You can't really put two of the same page out to Google. One's going to get indexed, one isn't, unless you do it over time. One thing I've seen, and this is harder for smaller sites, so one trend I've seen that's really interesting to me with big e-commerce sites, Etsy was doing this, I think, when Steph Chang was there. She was doing some really smart stuff. Taking product pages, for example, and splitting them up. You have 10,000 product pages, doing an A/B test with 2 groups of 1,000 product pages, and looking at how they compare on Google. And I've seen some, there's pitfalls to that. But where your site is big enough that you can test your own site at scale, and there's some risks and some dangers, and you have to do it in a smart way. But I've seen some interesting stuff with that. And
but
with
again,
on-page
I don't want anyone to fall into the trap of testing your own site, because I'm also testing against competitors, against that SERP or that query space, etc. So that visibility across the board, regardless. I mean, I'm not
right. It's just if you're big enough, sometimes you got a lab within your own site you can put to use. It's going to tell you certain things. It's not going to tell you other kinds of things.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one good way to go. And when you have those larger sites with a lot of like pages, so in your example, Pete, you've got 10,000 like pages, and you take one block and test it one way, and another you test it the other way. There's another concept, and I just want to actually see if I can share that really quickly here. And is that showing currently?
Yes.
So 5 ranks of necessary SEO evidence. Is that slide showing?
Yep, we got you. I even locked you in so that you can
okay, good. Excellent.
Talk away, man.
So, just for all fairness, this is a slide that was from Josh Bashinsky, a well-known black hat type, but
most of the people in this room are quite familiar with Josh.
Yeah, and but the idea here is single variable experiments on little trafficked web pages, basically. So it literally talks about a nonsense SERP, and one thing changes only, and these sort of single variable experiments. So that's kind of another philosophy for approaching this. A little bit of a pitfall here from the point of view that what you learn here might not apply to your specific set of circumstances with your particular web page. But I wanted to share the idea because I thought it was a good idea around this single variable experiment. And it's another way that you can get at this.
We used to see a lot more of that. I think it's appealing because it's so controlled. I think my fear over time was that it's such a vacuum. It's such an art. Sometimes you create these microsites and you rank them on these nonsense keywords, and there's things you can prove with that really effectively. But then you put it in the context of a real site with links and mentions and all these other things going on, and click data and history,
and competition, and
you find competition, and you just find it falls apart. And so I think one challenge sometimes is, what are you trying to test? With Anna, rank a site with no links, and you do it once. One time might be enough, right? If you do something like I used to do, and I'm going to canonical everything to my homepage, and you see that, oh yeah, that screwed it up. I mean, is that definitive proof? No, but at least you had that hypothesis and you tested it, and that one time probably means something. If you got that one microsite to rank,
you start to fall into correlation in a vacuum. So.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. By the way, fun side story, for a long time, Sears used to have all of its facets in its e-commerce section canonical to their homepage. It was not good SEO. That was my SEO tip for the whole show.
He's paper.
There are things I've convincingly proved to myself by doing them once and having to pay the price of doing them once.
So I would say one of the things on Eric's display there was the Google stuff. Those are the tests that I rely on. For instance, I read constantly 60 characters for a title. I know it's a lot more than that, because that's what they display in the SERP. What they actually index, which you can get by using all in title, boom, tells me it's 82 characters that are indexed and weighted. And yet I see in software and all over the place 60 characters. And when they started on about the, measuring it by the pixel, well, that's, again, every time they change the design of Google search page, that changes. So in my opinion, no way can that be any kind of ranking factor, because it's a too big a variable.
I have to recalculate it every time that happens. So
there you go. But to me, it's useless information, other than that's what they display. But even then, those numbers are all depending on truncation, and you got to check it visually anyways.
Here's a tip for you. Google Web Console or Google Search Console, right? Go in and the HTML validator in the old version, put 795 characters in a title tag. Make it a complete sentence or several complete sentences.
It'll index it all.
Index, validate it, it won't give you an error on it. So,
right, up to 1,024 characters, which is the HTML specification.
Exactly.
And they do index it, and it is counted as part of the content. So all along, I put my misspellings after the 90th character. Yeah.
And all the keyword stuffing and all that. Got it.
I don't do the keyword stuffing. Please don't even mention that. You notice I didn't. That's a stupid thing to do, folks. And, thank God I never, in 25 years, I've never ventured down the idiot's road. Sorry.
That gets into another thing that complicates this. Is I think we have a lot of indirect factors now where, look at that title tag length. Is title tag length a ranking factor? I doubt it. But it gets cut off. But if it gets cut off somewhere important, and that dramatically changes the engagement, does that matter? I'm not going to say that the click-through rate drives the ranking, but does that matter in some feedback loop that eventually drives ranking?
Or
I
even,
think it does.
Or even the weighting of the words in there. Is there a harder weighting on 10 words as opposed to 20 or 100?
Right.
So if we did that study and we found out that mattered, and then we say, oh, it's all about your title tag length, and what we're missing is that the title tag length is affecting the engagement, then we kind of got a valid test that leads us down the wrong path. Even if we could prove it, we're still going down the wrong path by freaking out about keeping everything under 59 instead of seeing why did that cause engagement to change.
Right.
And I think that can make things a lot more difficult now.
Well, for example, on the keyword stuffing thing, if you use more than 3 items in a series in a title tag, they're going to ding you. So it's not only just the length, the composition in there and the mitigating circumstances where you'll actually incur a penalty instead of a bonus by keyword stuffing.
Because it's treated the same as the rest of the content. Doesn't matter that it's in the title tag. It's just part of the content. So if you spam in there, it's like spamming in your content. You're not actually hiding it. But for misspellings, sorry, in my opinion, that's a good SEO technique.
All right, just for fun, Bill, I don't really think I have, if ever, come across much of anything in a patent or a research paper that discusses title tags and scoring and weighting and things of that nature.
Not too much. There was a semantic connectivity patent that talked about things like when you have a list, the heading for the list is equal distance to all items of the list. And they went on to that with that analogy to say the same thing about titles. A title of a page is equal distance to all words within the same page because it's the title and there's a semantic connection between them. That's the only thing in the patent I remember referring specifically to HTML title.
Which is funny because, again, everyone, you know, how many different studies or group roundups or this and that do we see that SEO after SEO starts talking about title tags? But I funny enough, when they were talking about Bill, I was thinking, I don't think I've ever read a patent or anything really on it.
I think to a degree that's because titles are like steering wheels. Car companies don't patent steering wheels. They make them round. It's prior art. So,
I think it goes back to Terry's point of the title tag is 1024 characters, and that's kind of set in stone, but ways that you can exploit that have been rules that have been written later on about how Google would deal with a title tag. Back when Yahoo web crawler were around and they were parsing web crawler for Yahoo, there was actually rules written that were copied from Yahoo to Backrub before it became Google about what you can't do that is spam. And it used to
there were a whole lot of negative SEO rules.
Exactly.
There were a whole lot more spam factors than positive factors. Yeah.
There's also the fact that as an SEO, part of our job is to optimize every element of HTML that we can. And I don't know, as long as I've been doing this, title tag has always carried the most weight over any other HTML element. So I'm going to pay the most attention to the title. That's why I've had an ongoing test for over a decade. And what I'm saying has not changed.
I think we've seen a shift, though, where Google is realizing that a good title doesn't necessarily have to have the keywords in a certain way. A good title, a title that doesn't have your keywords could still be relevant and
if it was relevant to the concept, definitely
relevant to the concept. Yeah. So that's changed, and that's, like you say, the ongoing testing. You know, you can't do this once 10 years ago, even if it was a perfect test, and say, "Oh, I'm done." That proves it forever, right?
Well, Eric, going back to what you were talking about user intent and stuff, what's another thing we've seen in the last 10 years is when Google doesn't like your actual title tag matching for that query, it puts its own in there. Yeah. It'll pull something off that page and say, well, this is what we think should be there because it's not matching that intent.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. That because, well, kind of, I hate to bring the phrase into this particular conversation, but what we just talked about started to sound suspiciously like right for users.
So, heaven forbid.
Google's never actually mentioned that, have they?
Google's my best customer. That's why I write for Google. They pay everything off my sites.
Right, but I mean, to be fair, right, knowing that they look at user engagement metrics and Bill, I know you can regale us with dozens of related patents, but we don't know which ones they're using. But we know they're using some, right, and some. So that very much drives things in that direction. There's no question in terms of like making users happy.
But Eric, I can tell you, I didn't have to do testing, right, to figure out that when the more people click certain types of elements in the SERP, the rankings go up. Because I saw it, because I watched the SERP. And in the winter, when pajamas are really, really, really in vogue, all the pajama stores are at the top. In the summer, they're on page 2, and Wikipedia's in the top spots.
Yeah, but see, now you got to start understanding click bias, and once again, we don't have access to that. Google does, and that just become a whole beast, of course.
Some stuff, I think it's almost a waste of time to test it because it's there in plain sight.
All right, so Eric, you've done a ton of testing over the years. So what, how about like just a little story of your journey? Like, have you looked back at stuff you've done in the past? Go, well, I kind of should have. That was badly organized. Or do you have tests that you still stand by and go, well, we learned some actionable or at least insightful data here and there? Like, as someone who plays around testing, and Pete, you're next on this one, by the way. What has been your experience over the years trying to test and mess around with Google? Like, what's gone right, what's gone wrong, what have you learned?
Well, I mean, from a disciplined SEO testing point of view, I think where we started this whole conversation with how important understanding different contexts are is absolutely right on. You have to really, and the thing that I find on this particular healthcare site might not work on a travel site, and it might not even work on another healthcare site. And having to deal with those granularities is a big deal. So isolating the context as much as you can is very much of what we try to do with this. What Pete talked about earlier when we were testing on a site, we very much like to be able to build these strong control groups and test groups and pit them against one another. So give you an example of one quick case study. There was a really well-known e-commerce site that had the infamous SEO copy on it. And we took and rewrote 182 of those content blocks, and we had another 180 plus that we didn't touch. And we took all the SEO thinking about it and we made it very user focused. We did a lot of cross-linking to other pages. We wrote it like we were trying to create a guide to help them make better buying decisions on the page. And the stuff, our pages went up 182% in terms of total search traffic. The pages we didn't touch went up 8%. So we had a good control group, right? So that kind of testing can work well. The idea of having a control group and the test group is meant to isolate the environmental factors. And it can be good at that. There are limitations, like if your competitor is testing something in the same space at the same time. So we've done a fair amount of that with different clients. The single variable testing from the slide that I showed from Josh Bashinsky.
Yeah, well, by the way, Josh is chatting away on one of the comment streams on the event page there for you. So. Hi, Josh.
Hi, Josh.
I'd bring you in, but then this thing would go for 3 hours, bro.
So he, I like that methodology for certain kinds of tests. I think that can work really well, where you're just basically trying to put it in a situation where a single factor could potentially make a material move, even regardless of the weighting of other factors. And I think that's a good way to go. We haven't done a lot of that kind of testing here, to be honest, but I think it's an interesting area to explore as well.
But that's on a single site, right, Eric?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the best kind of testing. Yeah. I kind of look at it like this. I have a theory. It cannot really hurt the client if I try this theory. Does it work?
And Terry,
those are the kind of results that are maybe usable in the future.
I mean, like you and I always talk about too, Terry, having an intimacy with that client's query space is going to help you a lot too, because you know what I mean. You're used to how things have ran there for the last year or whatever. So those subtle changes, those little bits and pieces that you start to test with after you understand that query space or that set of query spaces and that visibility for that client, that's going to help you a lot as opposed to just random stuff. You know?
And those kind of things that I do, I've known that query space like for years. I know who's ranking. I know their backlink profiles. Like I can tell what's happened in an update by looking at the 6 sites that I monitor for that client. It's all right there.
Right, and all that context is incredibly useful in interpreting the results, because like we talked about at the beginning of this session, right? We were really talking about the integrity of the data and the right way to interpret the data and understanding what it really means, and really sorting out and having a useful understanding of the complete context of what you're looking at. Yeah, you can't get meaning without all of that.
All right, so Pete, now your turn, buddy. All right, so you're a little bit of what things have you tested over the years, things you think that worked or didn't work, or what you would change, or your current thoughts. Like, I know, again, Moz, you've got lots of data and things to play with over there, and you are a doctor after all. So
that's someone on the spot. Eric stole all my ideas. No, we've done a ton more segmentation, and I think the challenge is, yeah, some of it's vertical, some of it's recognizing that within industries things can be really different. Some of it's intent-based. One thing we've seen is that, I don't want to say this is machine learning, but I strongly suspect it's machine learning related, is that when you have a heuristic algorithm, when you have a human trying to create these rules, they can only create so many rules, right? They're trying to create rules for kind of the whole world. When you have a machine creating some of the rules, they can create a separate set of rules for 200 different subverticals, right? So it's no harder for the machine to do that. And so I think this is kind of a consequence of making that switch to a machine learning driven algorithm, that they are able to segment more within verticals. And I'm sure they're segmenting a lot of ways. So we've seen that. We've seen that with ranking factors. Obviously we've done that study. We've shied away from redoing it. And we're discussing, like, what does it mean in 2018 to come up with one set of ranking factors and claim that they're true for everyone? I believe in the correlational research to a point, done well. I think that can get a bad rep, but to put out one set of rules, even done as the best we can, and say that that applies equally to everyone, that's misleading. That isn't helping people. It's not actionable. I'll give an example. The August 1st update, I was digging into.
Okay, but not only is it not actionable, it could actually be misleading in some instances.
Yes.
Right. It could be.
I love you, bro, and I've known you a long time. Love Moz. But that's the kind of thing that Bill and I would chirp on once in a while when those would come out. We were like, well, not only are you not talking to, search engineers, you're talking to SEOs, and then we're talking about a bunch of finite factors that often don't even fall into information retrieval kind of terminology or aspects that me and Bill would even understand. So I think some of that can be occasionally dangerous, because it could lead SEOs down that wrong path. The SEOs looking for the big red button kind of guys.
I mean, look, if you say this is a 5 and that's an average of an 8 and a 2, that 5 is a pretty lousy representation of the whole world. Let's put it that way, to short circuit a 20-hour argument. Yeah, there are a ton of pitfalls. I'm gonna give an example, though, I think it's interesting. With the August 1st update, everybody was looking at the healthcare sites, right?
Wrong.
Not me, man.
Well,
but yeah.
But
Systrix, and Barry Schwartz jumped on it, and so on and so on. I know what you said.
There was certainly a strong impact on that vertical, like, no question. But I started talking to somebody in the recipe space who had seen huge gains, and it turned out that they were good friends. They're just a tight-knit space, right? And so about 10 different people in the recipe space who went way up or way down have contacted me, and it's really interesting to see how it hit that vertical. And there's a whole different set of learnings from that vertical than kind of this one we were focused on, or trying to look at. Well,
because that's kind of what I was saying to Eric earlier, is that, I'm kind of with them on this query classification or intent train or whatever we want to call it, because that's something, Eric, that Terry and I were talking about with that August thing, that it seemed like, to us at least, it was hammering around that as much, and everyone got run off with that medic stuff. I wasn't as convinced.
Yeah, I actually looked at the sister sites. All of them. I've spent over 30 hours figuring out why one went up and another went down. Yeah, anybody who calls that the money of your life algorithm is gonna miss a lot of really important things.
No, sorry, Pete. We cut you off there anyways. Pete, finish up what you're saying as far as going forward.
One more thing on the testing side. I found that my own testing has also been, I think one frustration we have with the giant studies is sometimes they're just not very actionable. Even if we felt like they were not misleading, they were completely right. And so I think a lot of my own work has gotten into things like, a lot around features, feature snippets, other SERP features. So for example, you know, a few years back, I had my first post rank for featured snippet. The first thing I thought was, well, what happens if I change that? You know, and getting into those micro tests of, okay, if I change the content, does the snippet change? If I change the content, am I more likely to rank? Am I more likely? And then trying to scale that test up and repeat it, you know, can be a lot more useful, because maybe it's not as statistically valid of a data point. I changed this one featured snippet, but if it works, I know something I can do. I can try it again on 10 or 100, and I can see if it keeps working. And I've got something actionable. And maybe that won't apply to everybody, but at least it applies to what I'm doing. And I can keep testing it and keep challenging it, but I know I have something to do now, as opposed to just a bunch of numbers.
Right. And if it works for me, why do I need it to work for everybody?
Oh, right. It's still success, right? Well, and sometimes even if there's an action, you know, I strongly believe that authority matters a whole lot. But the takeaway from that, no matter how many studies we do or hundreds of hours we spend, is go build more quality links. Well, we all know that. If it was that easy, we'd just go do it, right? It's not actionable.
Well, it used to be. Come on.
You're right.
About
quality.
That's all. That was every forum everyone was ever on until 2008. The answer was throw some more links at it. You know, guys like me would be sitting there talking about, you know, site structure, information architect. Wouldn't matter. Just throw some more links at it. That was the answer. That was the S. Then Matt beat everyone up, and they all went to do social media or something. All right, so Bill, I know this probably, you know, I don't know if this is a point or not, but would like your viewpoint as far as personal testing, or what kind of things do you do? I know you're sort of like me on the large scale stuff, but you know, what kind of things do you play with in your world?
I do see some things that I want to try. They sound reasonable. The thing with context-based indexing, where Google said we might look at knowledge bases, find context terms for meanings of certain words, made sense to me to experiment with. So I found some terms that a site was ranking for that had words ranking with multiple meanings. Looked those words up in knowledge bases to see the right context, and took some context terms, added those to the pages that they contained, and traffic went up about 20% for that site. I did it on only 20 pages, but it made a big difference in how those pages ranked.
Yeah,
and that was worth trying. It is worth making those types of experiments.
Right. Yeah. So it's funny because you sound kind of like me in the sense that, you know, I'll read something, not one time in a patent, but, you know, when you and I are talking, you see that pattern over time of different interests, if it's research papers, patents, whatever, this interest in a certain area, that often drives the kind of tests that I'll do. It's not, again, I don't look at whatever top ranking factors post by some turd somewhere. I kind of just sort of, through osmosis of 20 years and reading stuff, say, well, you know, it's interesting. Let's see if this works, if this is going to work in this query space or in this market or whatever. So yeah, I tend to end up doing that a lot. Yeah. And so, Steve, you're kind of the mad scientist of the group. So I know you often like to come in, and I'm pretty sure Eric already stole the term regale us, so I can't use that now, or that'd be spamming, wouldn't it, boys? So Steve, I know you like to just poke the bear. You like to just run little things at it whenever your brain gets going or something. And you've done it. We've had many a hangout on Fridays where you'll come in and put your screen up and go, look, I was doing this and I messed with that. Like, you're like this sort of mad scientist of testing when it comes to Google, it seems.
Is Steve's brain ever not going? I think that's about 23 and a half hours a day.
Yeah. 28-hour days, because I can bill like, you know, each hour. But no, I think I was very fortunate when I worked at Rockfix to get the position of senior search scientist with no employee responsibility, no P&L, and just get to figure out search for Fortune 5 clients. You know, is it going to be better if FordParts.com stays up, or are we going to use subdirectories for international, or is it better for me to do parts.ford.com and use the subdomain and make that work better? So, hey, let's get to test it. You know, a big thing with online reputation management, we had big companies and, you know, they had a product recall. How do we get that out of Google search? Well, hell, let me figure it out. You know what I mean? The CEO of Walmart calls and says, "Hey, Steve, I want Walmart.com to come up #1 when someone types in email."
Was that the Search Console one?
That's the Search Console one.
Yeah,
right now,
yeah.
I swear to God, if you look at right now, actually go to search and type in email Walmart. Right now it's corporate.walmart.com. Contact us. Why? Because that's what it should be. You know what I mean? However, if they go into Search Console and were to remove that link, Walmart.com would be #1. Oh, gee, how hard is that to do? And it'll take about 8 seconds. But the thing is people don't test that stuff, so they don't know it works. So someone says, "Oh, we got to take that website down, redirect that page to this," instead of going, "Hey, have you ever thought it's in Google and you have owned the website? Why don't you just remove the URL? That'll work." So, it was one of those things of doing the obvious thing of why not go to Google and say, "Hey, Google, how do I fix this problem? I can only upload 50 locations. I have 15,000. How do we fix it?" You ask them. They say, "Hey, we'll want to help you out," because at this point, what Google really wants and whatever nobody's talked about, which is the elephant in the room, is AdWords. How does this apply to AdWords? How does this apply to Google making more money on AdWords? Regardless of, let's concentrate on the user, I will guarantee you every decision Google makes is based on how much money can I get on AdWords? Are there 4 terms above this in the query space? What happened to the terms on the right now? Oh, that's a knowledge panel. Oh, we can verify that. Oh, we can now show ads in your knowledge panel. Oh, you can now have a page on your own Google listing and Google My Business to where you can make your own blog on Google instead of WordPress. What happened to Blogger? Oh, wait, but let's do it in local. So it's all the testing kind of things, and those things work. And it's how do you do Google's products? How do you play with Google's products? How do you go to the next level with Google products and make things work? Because that's what they want you to do. Google My Plus, where's it at? Oh, it still works, but nobody's using it. But hey, it's still working.
I think, dude, you also have that very, and I don't want to use simplistic because I know you're a smart dude. We've been together for a long time, but you also have that you don't know till you know attitude. And I like that. You know what I mean? It's just, there's so many assumptions. Like people read it in a blog post and this and that. And you always ever, we're sat in some hangouts and you're doing stuff live. You're like sitting there messing with shit. And it's like, beauties, man, because you don't know until you know. Like, don't make an assumption because you read it somewhere, somebody you met, go try it. Go mess with it. Go do that. See what happens,
And Steve, let me ask you something on that enterprise scale, on that Fortune 5 scale. When you do that, how do you mitigate the risk? Because I think a lot of people worry about, a lot of people don't have the experience. They want to go in and try something. They want to mess with something, but there's risk. There's consequence. Like, how do you approach that and not do damage?
Well, I think it's what we're talking about. For example, when I did the whole ORM thing for Walmart, when you've got a shooting in a Walmart every single day and we don't want it to come up in search anymore, how do you fix that problem? Well, we come up, there's a bunch of stuff going on in China with Walmart. How do we make that go away? Well, let's put up a corporate website that takes our press releases. We're not doing link buildings. We're actually putting out press releases. So where's the website for the press releases? Well, the problem is you did SEO too good on that, so that works. So let me give you the thing of Walmart search. Walmart had site search, and at some point we're going to pay you to go look and see what you think is better in search. And so I went and bought stuff. I searched for stuff. It didn't work. Why didn't it work? Well, we wrote that down. We gave that to Walmart. They fixed it, and then all of a sudden, next December, 65% increase in online sales. So it's one of those things of okay, here's your rule for enterprise stuff. Am I going to interrupt the daily operation of business? Number one.
No, but I also think what he's saying, though, is mitigating in the sense that if it doesn't work, are you constructing things that you can revert back to in a heartbeat or within a reasonable time frame? I think that's what he's after.
I don't think you go there. I think you've got to know enough of what you're doing, test on your own crap. Naturally, a Walmart or a Ford is going to be bigger. You got to do what's right. If there's too much of a risk, I mean, at some point, somebody's going to sue an SEO for screwing stuff up.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I get at. Like, we're joking around about you going in and just playing with things and trying things, but you're not flipping a switch just to see what happens on a Walmart scale client. I mean, you're really working with a lot of data and a lot of experience. And
absolutely.
Yeah, like the whole SSL thing I'm doing today is you go to steveplunkett.com without the www. Right now, it doesn't work. My site's screwed up. Why? Because I've got a problem with the company that has 800 locations that I've got to fix, and it's basically on that kind of thing with a redirect because of the way they're doing stuff. And how do we redirect across timelines to where we don't expose sensitive healthcare information or financial application data, which they're using? So I have to test that kind of stuff. And my own website doesn't work. I have 20.
I think that's a good takeaway. Fuck up your own site first.
Yes, exactly. Screw up your own stuff first before you do it to the client, because a long time ago, what I had to do was give other SEOs like Elmer and Posna, those guys, Tony Very.
Yeah, well, does this bring up another point, guys, that once upon a time, this is what we used to do, is have little practice domains and domains we can go mess around with and do all this stuff. Funny that this took to the top of the hour to come up with, but that was a thing. You know what I mean? I'm sure everyone here at some point had a handful of domains or throwaways or whatever. I mean, that you could play with, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I still do too, but
it's still a thing. I don't care. I'm not trying to make money for my own stuff. I'm trying to do what's best for the client, like Terry said earlier. So I'm going to break my own crap over and over and over and over. If my Twitter account gets banned, so what? I didn't get somebody else's Twitter account banned. Right. I mean, that's part of what I do. Is the reason why I'm not a blogger, the reason why I'm not out there doing this, doing that, is because I break my stuff all the time. Why? Because I want to make sure if it's going to break for the client, I know why, and don't do this. And by the way, don't use no follow. You know what I mean? Why? Because you're going to have to take it off in about 6 months. Let's think about it for a second. Those kind of things of thinking. Plus, I've been doing SEO.
Remember the old one, dude? Future proofing, man. You gotta be like miles ahead of the game when it comes to client shit. So.
That was the point I wanted to make, is that testing is all about improving your framework of how you do SEO and doing things that are gonna do something and not hurt the client. That's the bottom line for me. If it ain't gonna hurt them, even if it doesn't do what I want, it don't do. It doesn't do any damage. My English is bad, and that's the main thing for me. And it's all about say, for instance, a long time ago, I thought the earlier you put something in the title tag, the more weighting it got. I can tell you when I checked last week, not any longer. That's something I can take out of my chest. I don't have to worry about that.
Hey, Terry, here's a tip for you. Take that same line of thought, apply it to how many times does it occur across title, across meta, across OG, across the Twitter card? Where is it in the body copy? Is it in an H1? And look for the congruency of all those factors. Now you start to see that same line of thing, and that is where that works. If you just isolate it and do the one factor, it doesn't work. It's the whole thing. What's the context of the page? And, what's my click-through? What's my bounce, etc. Add those things all together. Now you got to test.
His test was to kind of counterbalance my theory of that weighting, and he didn't do it anywhere else other than the title. I can say my theory is that the earlier a concept happens in a HTML container, the more weighting it's going to get. And it makes sense. What something is about in an article is going to be in the first paragraph.
It's like the keywords tag, dude. If I just put one word in a keywords tag, it may not do anything. But if I use it in a sentence in the body copy and in other places, yeah, that keyword tag is going to matter.
Well, or at least it correlates.
Well, no, if you do it isolated, I've actually got one term to run, because here's the thing people didn't realize about keyword tags. Scrapers downstream all read the keywords tag. They all put it up on their website. Domain lookups and stuff pull the keywords tag, which then link to your website. So now you got a link with your keyword in it, but you only put it in the keywords tag. Oh my God, it works. Ah, right? You get the idea.
Again, people don't understand that just because it seems Google isn't indexing something. Well, that's what they're showing you. They could put any value they want on a no-follow link, for instance. All SEOs think NF is like bad. No. Look at the context and the
We're at the top of the hour, and folks, my final advice to everyone watching is just go get yourself about 140 years worth of experience, and you'll be fine.
There you go. How hard can it be?
Yeah, that's it. You only got to be in this business 20 years and talk to know people. And, you know,
that's the bottom line. It's always hard work. There's no buttons.
So we're in the hour. I'm gonna go across the panel. Last word of advice from everyone, or tidbits, and anything you just want to put out there before we go. Bill, you can go with this first, man.
So the thing that makes a difference is learning to ask yourself good questions. The better the questions you can ask yourself, and study search results, study the search engines, look at websites, you'll improve. It does make a difference. You will get some idea of things you want to test.
Beautiful. Mr. Eric, I see you typing. He's a busy man.
Well,
your words of wisdom going out the door, sir.
Yeah, I was actually typing a response to Steve in the chat here.
Oh, sorry.
So it's all contextually.
That's right, folks. All the good stuff's over here in the chat. I'll be selling that as an ebook later on for $29.95. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny. I'm going to draw out something that we kind of dissed a little earlier, and I'm going to put a positive spin on it. So, yeah, I completely agree. Don't go just reading a bunch of SEO blogs and see somebody says something's a big ranking factor and go run with it and assume it's a big ranking factor. But it can give you ideas to test. And then you got to test it for yourself in your own context and see if it works for you. So it's easy idea machine. Just don't take it to the bank and run with it like it's a done deal.
I'm a dead believer in that. And that's kind of how it always works for me. I'm like, I'm not sure about that. Let me go check. And,
yeah,
you know, yeah, for sure. Sir Pete?
Yeah, I think going back to what we were just saying, just make sure you have your own playground to play in, and have those sites that have some context and have some links, and so you can try stuff out on and break, because I think that still matters a lot. And especially if you're trying to work with enterprise, you know, you you can't afford to break them.
Yeah, but it happens. Thus, I have a job as a forensic SEO consultant. So keep breaking stuff, people. I'm a happy dude. Steve, your way out the door, sir.
I'm going to say one of those things of, you know, at some point, don't screw up your client's stuff. You know, it's okay to test, but testing your own playground, don't screw up your client's stuff. I'm going to go back with what Eric said, but then again, think outside the box. The best way you can get feedback on what you need to test is talk to the people that answer the phone. What do they get problems? People will call and complain to customer service. I can't find this on the website.
I always say though, it's salespeople and customer service, because they both get different ends of the fish. You know what I mean? So
exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Talk to the people that answer the phones. Talk to the people that get the general inquiry emails. What are the things that we're not addressing for the user? Because if they can't find it on your website, be it reviews, complaints, ratings, whatever, if they can't find it on your website, they'll find it on somebody else's, and you don't control it. So look for what you own, and control what you own for the user.
All right, beauties. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Eric, I know you got to get going, so thank you as always. Great to have you. And yeah, it was good fun, guys. And hopefully some people learned a few things, because it's been a long ongoing thing, and I hear it all the time in these SEO communities I still participate in. So now I don't have to talk anymore. I'll just share a link to the video and go.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Everyone, take care.
Bye.